Amazing. So thanks for coming. I'm pretty excited to talk about this, just because intuitive eating has become more popular in the last, oh, I don't know, what, 5 years probably. Um, and as a result, there's a lot of misconceptions around what intuitive eating is. And I'm very passionate about it. So I really love talking about it and sharing it and unraveling some of that. So thank you for coming to spend the evening with me and with Jenna. Um, yeah, so we'll go from there. Okay, so I swear I know how to use Zoom. There we go. That's me and my dog Moose. I will keep this very brief. I've been an naturopathic doctor in Barrie since 2004. I became exposed to non-dieting approaches actually when I was in school, not at school, but during that time in my life. But didn't really understand it and start to adopt it until closer to about 2009, 2010-ish would have been when I really started to dive into it because of my own history and challenges I had postpartum. And then in 2018 got certified as an intuitive eating counselor. I have lots of different labels. And yeah, my privileges include being white, cisgendered, able bodied, and I'm a small fat. So I still experience lots of privilege in this land. Yeah, so that's me. I also, like I said, I really do love answering questions. So please feel free to ask. Jenna's going to help manage that and take a look at things. And if there's anything that I need to answer in the moment, we can do that if there's some clarification. Okay, that's enough about me. This is what we're going to talk about today. What intuitive eating is and also what it's not. We're going to spend a significant amount of time talking about those myths and the misconceptions, and specifically about who it helps and, again, very importantly, who it doesn't, and who it might not be appropriate for. And then we'll do Q&A until we get too tired to keep doing Q&A or we run out of questions.
Hi, Kerri. I'm sorry I'm interrupting just quickly. Your voice is really choppy on my end, and I don't know if that's me or you.
I,
Are you
I,
wearing headphones?
I'm not.
Okay.
So can I connect headphone? Possibly. Let's keep playing here.
Did you just connect your headphones?
I can, or did it just change?
It did just change. What did you do? Yeah, you sound
No.
better. Oh,
Okay.
okay. Maybe, I don't know.
I will not connect my earbuds then, and we will keep going if I
Maybe
sound
it's my end.
better.
Okay, let's try. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, I this is a slide that is sort of incorporated from Reagan Chastain's work. If you've ever gone to one of her webinars, I love that she goes through this very clearly every time. I am a doctor, so I naturally talk about health, but health is not an obligation. You don't owe it to anybody. It's not about your virtue or your morality or your worth in this world. Um, you don't have to converse with anybody about it unless you invite them into that. It's very personal. It's very complex. There are many different facets to it. And working on your health looks different to everybody at different stages of their life. So please keep that in mind as we start talking about things tonight. And yeah, it's one of those things. It's like consent. I like to remind people that consent is something that is an ongoing process that you can withdraw at any time in the process. And this is another thing that I really like to remind people of. Okay. Years ago, I had a patient get really frustrated, and she said just how much she resented that she had to pay me to learn how to eat. She thought this was ridiculous. It's just food, and why is this so freaking hard? And this is why it's so hard. We have so many different cultures playing in on things. So within our own family, we have different rules and thoughts and beliefs around food and about bodies. And then, we have the culture that is whatever dominant culture you live within. And then we have diet culture. And then superimposed on that now, we have wellness culture, fitness and fashion, which for God, Jenna, you know all about that, getting caught in that land. It's messy and it's confusing, and there's a lot of voices. There's a lot of contradictory information, and we have been taught through all of these different cultures and systems to stop trusting our own body, our own desires, our own things, right? Everything about us, we start to question it, and we tend to give our power over to other people to tell us what we need and when we need it and all of those things. And that is why this is so tricky. And we also cannot forget, these stats really bothered me. Just in It is being taught to us all over the place that fat is bad and thin is good. And it's not just a description of bodies, it's all these things that go with it. And these are from children's shows and movies. And 75% of all of them have somebody who exhibits this, that should say lazy, not laxy, but these character traits are associated with fat people, and then these character traits are associated with thin people. So it starts very young, and it's coming at us from all over the place. So I hope that you can use that information to foster some self compassion if you feel like my patient who is just like, it's just food. Why is this so hard? This is a cycle that you are probably familiar with. It used to be um, that it was just body image that was in this. This is where we enter. There should be a little arrow here stepping in. But now we're worried about our health, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a body image thing, although we know that health and thinness are, again, very connected, colloquially and not necessarily medically, but we'll get into that also. But we start to worry about, you know, when I was young, it was my thighs and my chin. Um, for you, it might be something else. Maybe it's cholesterol, maybe it's blood sugars, who knows? What we land to is, because this is what we're used to, is a deprivation of some kind. The deprivation isn't always food, necessarily. It can often be that we're depriving ourselves of certain social events because we're trying to avoid the foods that we're not allowed to eat. It can be that we're depriving ourselves of other enjoyable activities because we're dedicating a certain amount of time to working out. That deprivation can come in many different forms. So it's not always just I'm reducing my calories or cutting out certain foods. When we do that, though, have you ever told a child that they are allowed to play with absolutely anything except whatever you tell them they can't have is what they want? It's a human quality. We do know that deprivation leads to this hyper focus, and that hyper focus can be intrusive food thoughts. It can be a hyper focus on, like, this is where orthorexia comes in, like the cleanliness of the food, or we get hyper focused on macros or calories. Like, there's so many ways we can get hyper focused. But that kind of tension invariably invokes a part of us that will fight, our little diet rebel inside that says, you can't tell me what to do. And it gets broken. And that tends to be an equal and opposite force to whatever restriction that we did. So the longer it's been going on, the tighter it's been, the bigger the boom, and the bigger the pendulum swings to the other side. In my world, that was binging. And it might be something different for you, but we tend to see that overeating, which is a term I don't like, but I don't have a better one tonight. And then this leads to sense of failure. And then shame is usually hot on its heels. Our self esteem takes a hit, and we hang out there for a little while until that gets really uncomfortable, and then we start the cycle again. And this leads to what you already know from personal experience, from watching what other people are doing, and from so much research. Diets don't work. Doesn't matter if we call them a lifestyle change, doesn't matter if we call them, I'm going to portion control or eat in moderation or make a lifestyle change. Any of those things, when if there is that restriction and deprivation part of it, it still causes the same cycle. And we see this over and over and over again. What else did I want to say on this one? Yeah, and to make matters worse, it not only doesn't work in terms of shrinking someone's body, it also causes harm. So we get metabolic changes that are permanent, and we get those emotional consequences of going through that cycle over and over again. And there are health consequences too. It increases the likelihood of developing diabetes. It increases the likelihood of cardiovascular disease. Um, it changes the makeup of the way that we store fat and where we store fat, which can have different consequences. It changes all kinds of things. So it's not that it not only doesn't work, but it actually causes quite a bit of harm. And we just don't have any studies that show that we can sustainably maintain a weight loss for any significant amount of time. For a clinically significant amount of weight. There are weight loss studies that show that people have maintained a weight loss, and they typically range in the 4 to 10 pound range. Sorry to use numbers. I say that simply because I don't have to change my belt for 4 to 10 pounds. So it makes zero meaningful impact in my world and in most of my patients anyways. Okay, I'm probably preaching to the choir on that one. So let's talk about what intuitive eating is. Um, I mean, I'm just going to read the screen to you for lack of better everything. It is a non-diet approach to eating that works to heal your relationship with food and your body. And it does this by cultivating trust and awareness with your body. Trust and awareness are two very important words. So sort of park those in the back of your mind as we go. Intuitive eating is about cultivating habits that contribute to your physical and mental well-being. The part that's really important there is that your mental well-being is absolutely a priority in intuitive eating. So let's get into it a little bit more. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the principles, but here they all are from 1 to 10. They all center around satisfaction. And the reason for that is if we don't like what we're doing, we're not going to do it for very long. We have to either really enjoy the thing or we have to really enjoy the result of that thing in order to maintain it for any significant amount of time. So your enjoyment and satisfaction is a big priority. So principle 1 is about rejecting the diet mentality. If you're part of Body Positive Fitness or have been following me for any amount of time, you're probably already in there, ready to accept that dieting is not working and that starting a new diet or going on a new plan is not going to get you what you're looking for. So then we get into the more practical things of hunger, honoring your hunger, trusting when your body says, I need food, and making sure that you give it adequate food at regular intervals throughout the day. Principle 3 is the one that has the most controversy, and I'm sure that we will talk about it later in some of the myths. But the making peace with food is the no food rules side of things. And I'll tell you, because we are going to dive into that more, but the basic thing with this is what we are trying to do is make food morally and emotionally neutral, meaning that we don't have good foods and bad foods. We don't have clean foods and dirty foods. And, someone recently referred to food as toxic and poison, and I just cringe inside. It's taking away these moral judgments and looking at food as what it is, which is an opportunity to nourish your body. And different foods have different nutritional values, but that doesn't make one superior to another. It just makes them different. Challenging the food police is all about those voices in your head, and we all have them. We have, they're chirping at us all the time, telling us about what we should eat, how much we should eat, when we shouldn't eat, all of the things. And so that principle is really about transforming those voices into ones that serve you instead of into ones that confuse you. Feeling your fullness, this is where a lot of people want to start. It's like, Kerri, I have to stop eating till I'm like, and yes, absolutely, that is part of it, is respecting when your body is full and um, and stopping at that sweet spot of comfortable fullness, which is a practice. Satisfaction, I already mentioned that. That is, I don't know if I have a slide, so I'm going to take a moment to just talk about satisfaction, because when I say that, I imagine you are probably conjuring some thoughts of like what it tastes like. And what it tastes like is 100% part of satisfaction, right? And eating the right amount of food for the level of hunger that you are contributes to satisfaction. I often share a story about when I was pregnant and my brother tends to eat much later than we do. And I was so hungry for dinner and I was complaining of how hungry I was. And he threw me a granola bar. Like, I don't need a freaking granola bar. I need like steak and potato. Like, I'm dinner hungry. So, that granola bar could have tasted amazing, but it was not going to satisfy what I needed. Right. So, satisfaction is about your whole body experience. It's about feeling good after you eat, or at least feeling the way that you want to feel after you eat, that your food is giving you what you need to do what you want to do in your life. So, yes, satisfaction. I want you to enjoy your food in your mouth, but I also want you to enjoy it in your body. Coping with your emotions. I talk a lot about emotional eating with patients, and food is emotional. We can't remove emotion from food. And if we are relying on food, if it is the only tool in our toolbox, then this principle is really about adding more tools into your toolbox and learning how to use them. Food typically remains a tool. I encourage you to keep it as a tool. We just don't want it to be your only tool. Respecting your body, that's about being kind, buying yourself new underwear, wearing clothes that fit, speaking to yourself with respect, appreciating what your body does for you. Exercise, movement in a way that feels good for your body. Don't hurt yourself with movement. It's a little bit of the body respect thing, but it's finding a way to move that again hits that satisfaction so that you can create a relationship with movement that you can do for a long time, because any intervention that you can't do most of the time is not going to have any impact on your health, right? So boot camps and cleanses, they don't have impact on your long-term health, because what we do for a day or a week or month in the grand scheme of our whole lives, with very few exceptions, has very little impact in the long term. So we need to be able to do something regularly. And that's really, in my view, what intuitive eating is all about. And then gentle nutrition is sort of the exciting place of having nutritional information guide your choices without dictating your choices, without evoking any sense of guilt or shame or disgust or any of those emotions around making choices. And looking at nutritional information as data and guidance. So it's just more peaceful. What else did I want to say about intuitive eating? It's you can't cherry pick one of these principles or three of these principles and call it intuitive eating. Just not having food rules is not eating intuitively. That's not having food rules. They're not the same thing. There's nothing wrong with just abandoning food rules and leaving it at that, but that's not what intuitive eating is. Um, I don't know how else to say that, right? We can't cherry pick it and call it intuitive eating. Intuitive eating has over 200 validated studies that support this. It's an evidence-based model to heal your relationship with food, to start trusting your body. It's associated with better body appreciation, life satisfaction, better glucose control, improved cardiovascular measures like cholesterol, blood pressure, all those kinds of things. The other really interesting thing is that people who eat intuitively have a much more diverse nutritional status. They eat lots more foods, and that contributes to better health. And they feel better about themselves. They have less sense of feeling out of control around food. They don't binge as often. All of these things come from implementing this model. And that means using all 10 principles. I had some notes here just about what it looks like when it's working. I know you can have a cupboard of foods that you might have previously thought were forbidden. One thing I often get, which are moments of like, oh, I'm getting this, is I get texts or messages from patients who say, I found half a chocolate bar cookie, whatever, half. And they never experienced that in their life because they forgot, or they found something that they bought and they'd forgot that they bought it. And this was a food that they thought they would never be able to eat in a sane and comfortable way. That's a pretty cool feeling. So that is what intuitive eating is on its most basic introduction. It's like learning a new language. There's diet speak and then there's intuitive eating speak. And like any language, the more you communicate and converse with people who speak the same language, the more the beautiful nuances of the language start to come out, because no language follows rules all the time. There's always nuances and just beautiful flow that happens. And that happens in the practice of speaking it. So it is about nuance, all of it. It's not following a bunch of rules, which is tricky when you come from a diet. Intuitive eating is not accessible to everyone. I will, I think, talk about that later, but when you think about people who don't have access to food, they don't have control over their food choices, where they are served or they're not served enough, though intuitive eating really works on understanding and trusting that you can eat whenever you need to. And so if you don't have access to food, this is a very difficult thing to do. I think I made mention of this already. It is not the same as just not dieting. Again, it's okay to just not diet. I'm not knocking that. I just want to be clear that that is not what intuitive eating is. Intuitive eating is implementing all of these principles together. I spent a very long time, like a good almost 10 years, in the zone of I wasn't dieting, but I wasn't eating intuitively. And I often share the story of, at the end of the day, being really, really hungry and thinking, great, there's no food rules, I'm gonna have cookies, and then making a dinner out of cookies. I love cookies. But as a meal, they're not particularly satisfying. But I didn't understand that because no one had explained some of the other principles to me. And all it did was erode my trust with myself and thinking that, well, clearly I couldn't be trusted with cookies. It wasn't about the cookies. It was about the whole day and my entire attitude towards eating. So we'll dive into that a bit more. And if you have questions, fire them off in the chat. Okay, let's talk about the myths, because this is really where I get excited. Intuitive eating is not a weight loss program. And anyone who is marketing intuitive eating alongside weight loss has not read intuitive eating, or does not understand intuitive eating, or is intentionally co-opting the language of intuitive eating. When we focus on external measures, meaning weight, calories, portions, all of those things, it takes us out of our bodies. And intuitive eating is about coming back inside your body, learning what hunger and fullness feel like, and learning how to attend to those needs in a timely manner. And if our focus is out here on what the scale says, that really interferes. I also want to be clear that that doesn't mean that in order to do intuitive eating, you have to be completely, um, I'm trying to find the right words here. Many people come and they would say, but like, I still want to lose weight. Does that make me not a good candidate? And look, the world we live in, we just talked about that, tells us that being smaller is better. And it's more, it's less about manage, it's how we respond to those thoughts, not so much as not having those thoughts. Um, Lots of people are going to think about, man, if I could just lose. And then it's really about what happens after those thoughts that brings us into a health at every size and intuitive eating approach or into a diet and wellness culture approach. I hope that makes sense. Who is intuitive eating for? This slide probably should have been further up. Anyways, it's almost for everyone. Almost. um, these are the people I tend to work with. They're just tired of being controlled by food. They think about food when they wake up. They think about food all day long. They think about what they should be eating, what they should not be eating, when they should be eating, all of the things. I see a lot of parents who, as their children start to show some body image or food things, or they hear something from the grandparents or from a teacher and they go, oh my God, I don't want my kids to have the same kind of relationship with the food and their body that I did, and I want to do things differently. And so they learn intuitive eating so that they can teach their children intuitive eating. The other big population that come to me because I am a naturopath is they're looking for a health focused alternative. So they want to address their health concerns and they know that nutrition is part of that, but they don't want to be given a list of good and bad foods and what to eat and what not to eat and all of that. They really want to focus on their health and their behaviors and not focus on their weight and their body. And adults and teens who just want a healthier relationship with food and with their body, who are just tired of the whole thing out there and just want to feel more comfortable and peaceful in their own body. So it is not for people facing chronic food insecurity. I mentioned that already. Intuitive eating really relies on the accessibility to food. And if that is not something that you have access to, it is very difficult. It doesn't mean that you can't implement intuitive eating to a degree, but the level of nuance really, really takes it outside of what has been studied. Let me put it that way. Anyone who's actively engaging in eating disorders, intuitive eating can be part of a recovery plan, but not while they're actively engaged with their eating disorder. It just requires a different level of care. Some of the things that people ask me, can I do this if I have diabetes? Yes. Does it require a more nuanced approach? Absolutely. I wonder if I've mentioned this. Ha! There's my next slide. So if you have a history of an eating disorder, then we definitely need to be more nuanced and approach it with kid gloves. We definitely need to apply more structure. Intuitive eating does have structure, which is another one of the myths that I could have put up here, is that it's just a free for all the time. It's not. There is structure. Anyone who's affected by health conditions like celiac or they have food sensitivities, 100% you can do intuitive eating. It's just, again, a more nuanced approach needs to be taken because there are different considerations. So let's get back to some myths. It's just mindful eating. Mindful eating is a wonderful tool. I did some training in mindful eating, specifically around diabetes. Mindful eating is one part of what intuitive eating is. So they're not the same, but they are similar. They're adjacent. Sometimes the mindful eating world can be a little too diet adjacent for my comfort, but mindful eating can provide a very useful insights as you're practicing some of the principles of intuitive eating. This is another thing I see out in the world. I've heard it from a friend's husband that it's anti-weight loss and people are losing weight, and intuitive eating is weight neutral. My practice is weight neutral. It just means that we're going to focus on behaviors and let your body do and be whatever size it wants to be. So if that includes weight loss, that's fine. No one's going to chastise you for losing weight, but no one's going to praise you for it either. Intuitive eating doesn't consider health. This is a massive pet peeve of mine. Intuitive eating was written by two dietitians. They're registered dietitians. Just like me in the health world, health is their focus. It has been researched over and over and over again to show that it does promote health in many different aspects. Where this gets into because gentle nutrition is the last principle, because we need to deal with so many of the different food voices and listening to your body and all of these bits, sometimes the initial approach to food doesn't always look particularly nutritious, but it does level out. We're going to get into that more. But intuitive eating is health promoting, and it actually centers health. Okay, how many of you have thought this? I will never stop eating. I think this is one of the Ask Dr. Kerri questions that came up of, when I don't focus on food, when I give myself permission to eat intuitively, I just don't stop. And there are a couple reasons why people feel this way about, so restriction, remember that cycle we talked about, that restriction, the pendulum will swing hard the other way. And so if you have been in a very restrictive state, if you have been undernourished, which happens across the size spectrum, I might add, then your body is going to insist on pumping out all the hunger hormones, and it's going to mute the fullness ones to try and re-establish some food. A beautiful analogy I heard was, Gilligan's Island, the 3-hour tour. If you're expecting to be on an island for 3 hours, you're not bringing much, right? Like maybe some bug spray, and you might have a hat and maybe some sunglasses. But if you got trapped on that island for a little while and you decided to do it again, you're probably packing some snacks, you probably bring some other things, you're going to be more prepared just in case you get stuck there again, right? You do that again, you might actually bring a backpack that's got like a sleeping bag and a little, Bunsen burner so that you can cook. Every time you do this, you're going to become more and more prepared. And that's a great analogy for what your body's going to do. So the more restricted you've been, the urge to sort of replenish yourself will be strong. The other one, if try breathing through a straw, you can effectively get some air in, but when you remove the straw, you're going to take a big breath, and you're probably going to breathe heavily for a bit until you're reoxygenated and your respiration rate can come back down to a normal range. The same thing happens with thirst, right? You get really thirsty, you take a sip of water and you start chugging it back until finally it settles down. And so a similar thing happens with food, and also it will settle down. This one is an extension of that. I will only eat crap. I don't think pizza is crap, by the way. I just thought it was a fun slide and it was a different color. And pizza falls into that. People are like, oh, I gotta stop. Anyways, you will not only eat crap, but similarly, and it's an extension to what I just said, if you are told that you cannot, then you will, right? When that dam breaks, you're probably going to at first be the proverbial kid in the candy store of eating all of the foods and wanting all of those foods. But once that neutrality, it's called habituation, once that settles in, then that primal urge and that urgency to eat those foods starts to diminish. Interesting pizza story. They did a study with university students and they enrolled them into the pizza study where they said, for this month, pizza's on us every night for dinner. Uh, and within a week or two, they started to have a pretty high dropout rate because they were only allowed to eat whatever kind of pizza they chose to eat. And it gets boring, right? It's really exciting at first. And then when it's just always there, it stops being exciting. And that habituation happens over time and can be done in a systematic way. It doesn't have to be a full free for all. They never stop gaining weight is the caveat here. Being in a higher weight body is absolutely, there's nothing morally wrong with that. And I am not, this conversation is not to say that that is bad or wrong. This is a fear of a lot of people, though, so it needs to be addressed that if they stop dieting, they are just going to start packing on the pounds and it will never stop. And I won't say that that never happens. Um, if your body needs to restore weight, it will do that. And that does happen in bodies that aren't emaciated and small. It happens in bodies that appear to be bigger than they should be. Again, it depends on the level of restriction. In my experience, people do level out. And for a lot of people, it really doesn't take that long. And for other people, it takes a long time. And it really just depends on how the process goes, and how things are implemented is really how that goes. So I'd love to give people this like reassurance so that they could just like give it a try. But some people do gain weight. It is definitely a possibility. And I don't want to lie to you and say that it's not. Um, but you will stop. I've heard people refer to it as we can turn anything into a diet. And so some people take the principles of intuitive eating and turn it into a diet. This is what I see with mindful eating, right? Like if you're not eating just completely focused without any distraction and paying full attention, then you're failing at it. Some people see this as you have to only eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, and there's no room for those beautiful baked cookies that somebody brings to you, or a piece of chocolate in the middle of the afternoon just because that would be delicious. That is all part of a healthy relationship with food. Um, so yes, you're allowed to eat even when you're not hungry, when you're eating intuitively. Okay, what does a path to becoming an intuitive eater look like? I do not recommend breaking all of your food rules. You will notice that make peace with food is the third principle of intuitive eating. It is not the first. And within that principle, there are guidelines around it. So I just didn't have food rules, but I didn't understand honoring my hunger. I had broken my hunger fullness meter. I didn't I didn't know what it meant to be a little bit hungry. I only knew what it felt like to be absolutely ravenous. I didn't tend to my needs in any particularly astute way. And many of my patients experience this when they step one, I don't have any food rules anymore, and then they eat all the things and they feel really overwhelmed, and then they go back to dieting. And I understand why they land back there because it's a very scary place, right? You're standing there, the dam breaks, you get completely overwhelmed. Don't start there. We need to build a foundation of self compassion. That's hugely important. And that interoceptive awareness, which is what does my body need and how can I give it what it needs? And how can I tend to that in a timely manner, right? Because knowing that you're hungry and actually feeding your body what it needs are two very distinct steps. Yeah. Let me just check my notes to see if there's anything else I'm going to say on this slide. No. Yeah. So first, we have to learn how to listen. We have to listen to our bodies, understand, and respond. So those happen before we start breaking rules in my process anyways. Every intuitive eating person is it's moderately different, but according to the authors that wrote it, there are some steps, right? And we we really have to believe that we can trust our bodies. We have to believe that we can eat this food again whenever we want it. We have to not break our food rules on a day when we're absolutely stressed to the max. The kids have been going crazy and the boss is demanding and all of the things, the car broke down. That's not a day to try and make peace with the food and just say, screw it, we're not following this rule. That does not build trust. And the whole point of this, we're trying to foster trust. So this, if anyone wants a like, what do we do? This is what we do. We start with, am I hungry? And do you even know what that feels like? So many people have just completely messed up their hunger and fullness meter. Their scale is just completely screwed. And that's because they have been ignoring their hunger or suppressing their hunger for so long. That QR code is if you would like a copy of this. You can scan that and one will get emailed to you. So we start there. We start with, do you know what hungry feels like? This is where some nuance comes in too, right? If you are neurodivergent, you may not have access to some of these feelings in your body that you need. Certain medications mute these signals. Caffeine mutes these signals. So we need to be aware of things that might be interfering. And so that's part of the process, is sort of going through all those boxes to figure out what hunger feels like and the different levels of hunger. And then if you are hungry, this is what we're working on. What do I want? What do I need? What do I have? And that intersection is that sweet spot of satisfaction. What do I need from my food? What am I looking for from a texture standpoint? How much food do I need? What do I need this for? All of those things. If you're focusing on particular nutritional bits, then that's going to be part of the what do I need also. If you're increasing fiber content for a particular reason, then that's going to be part of the what do I need, right? And then there's the other side of it. So if you are very confident that you're not hungry, well, then what is driving you to think that food might be the answer and what it is that you're looking for? So then we go through these questions and we find the answers to these things. And you'll notice at the bottom that sometimes we're going to use food or other things to cope and distract, because whatever comes up, we either don't have the tools or we don't have the access to actually deal with what it is. And so we're going to take care of ourselves. And sometimes food is part of that. Important bits here. This is a practice. You can't fail at practicing something. You're either practicing it or you're not. There's no Yoda try. Anyway, it looks different for everybody, and even within your own life, practicing intuitive eating one week is going to look different than the next, year over year. And that's the beauty of it and the frustration with it. The frustration is sometimes we're overwhelmed and we just want to be told what to do. Tell me what to eat, when to eat, how much to eat, all the things. I get the pull to that. The beautiful part about intuitive eating is that you're finding a way to eat that works for you. It's sensible, it's satisfying, and it's sustainable. And that sustainability is the really big key here, right? That you can find a way to nourish yourself, all of yourself, and maintain that over the long term, even when life is hard and everything's falling apart. Yeah, this is what I wrote somewhere. It teaches you how to learn and implement a system that will flex with the various pressures of life so that it fits into your life instead of you trying to fit the plan into your life or fit yourself into the plan, right? Compassion, gentle, kind. That's really what this is all about. It's about quieting the noise. Have you ever seen those meditation jars? So they're like, there's glitter suspended in a liquid. It's like a snow globe, but more dense. And when you shake it, you can't see through it. It's just almost one whole color with little sparkles. And when you stop shaking the jar, it starts to just settle. And after a while, it's perfectly clear again. And that's a great analogy for we're just going to stop shaking your jar. We're going to quiet the noise that's been coming in from everywhere else for so long and let you listen and understand and see what it is that you need so that you can attend to it. Okay. That's the QR code for that Am I Hungry poster. Again, if you want it, that's my website. That's how you can find me on social media. And that is a link that I think Jenna's given out a couple times, but that's how you can book a free meet and greet with me. I can answer questions that you don't want answered on a Zoom call with other people, which is totally fair. If you want to see what working with me might look like, that would be the way to do that. Okay. Anyone how do you want to do this, Jenna? Do you want me to answer those 3 questions that were asked before first and then get
Yeah. Yeah, I would say let's answer those questions that you've already got, and then maybe that will spark some questions with other people. If anyone does have questions on the top of their head already, feel free to put it in the chat. But Kerri's got some questions to start with.
perfect? So, the first question that came through was how to control or curb constant feelings of hunger. Um, I think Jenna put a reel up of me answering this, but there's a couple things there. One is like, is it hunger or is it appetite? Because hunger and appetite are different things, right? Hunger is the array of symptoms that your body exhibits when you are in need of food. And then appetite is the desire to eat. And when they come together, it's amazing, increases satisfaction wholeheartedly. But sometimes they happen independently of each other, right? We can have the desire to eat without physical hunger, and we can have physical hunger without the desire to eat. Last week with my sinus infection, that was me. My body was screaming that it needed food. I really didn't feel like eating. So that would be my first thing that I would want to explore with you is, are we talking about actual physical hunger or are we talking about appetite? The other thing I would want to know is, are you eating enough food? We are just so conditioned to thinking that 1,200 to 1,500 calories is enough food. It's not. And so often we think we're eating enough food, and our body is then pumping out all of the hunger hormones because there's just inadequate nutrition. It's like a semi-starvation state. Um, and last but not least, I would wonder about the non-food things. So are we dealing with insulin resistance, where you're maybe physically full, but the blood sugar isn't rising quickly because it's having a hard time getting in? It's like you go to the gas station and you fill up your tank, and yet the fuel's not getting to the engine. So that would be something I would wonder about. I would wonder about sleep and stress because those impact appetite and hunger and fullness hormones. There could be a lot of things coming into that. So it's not really a super straight answer. Sorry about that. The other one that came through, attempting to practice intuitive eating seems to give my brain an excuse to eat whatever and whenever. I can't control my overeating with certain foods like chocolate. I think I addressed this a little bit, but I will address it more specifically in that my very first thought is that you're not actually practicing intuitive eating, that what you're doing is just not dieting. And those really are two very distinctive things. So, intuitive eating involves that body respect and that ability to tune into what it is that your body's looking for. There's all those food voices and managing the emotional and moral judgment about chocolate versus other foods. There's many different things at play there. So, yeah, I don't I don't start with breaking the rules, um, because that can foster what you're talking about, which is not trusting. It is believing that certain foods hold a power. And I mean, to a degree, they do, not in a food addiction model, but in an emotional state. That makes sense. So that would be my biggest concern there. And then yeah, the other note that I made on that was if you're at the beginning of letting go of some food rules, there can definitely be a larger drive to those particular foods because they've been restricted. Um, I often share the story of me making peace with Swedish berries. I love Swedish berries, and there's a huge emotional component from childhood, which is a long story that I will not share. But I didn't feel like I could be trusted with them. So I went through the process of doing it. And I ate Swedish berries every time I ate for almost 4 days. I think it was three and a bit before I finally was like, okay, I know I can have Swedish berries. I'm good though. Like, I don't need them. And now they can safely be in the house and it's a non-issue. But it took intentional peacemaking to make that happen. So again, not a you'll notice I never have an entirely straight answer for things, but that would be another thing to consider. And then the third question that came in beforehand was how will or should heavy lifting impact intuitive eating? And how does working out hard impact how I should nourish my body? And I love that question because if we go back to, no, I want to go backwards. I'll go the other way. Take me back. Oh, it's thinking. So if we go back to, yep, that guy over here, right? What do I need? Is part of the consideration. So when we're working out hard, when we're putting higher demands on our body, we know that we need to one have adequate calories going in. We know that we need adequate carbs and adequate protein so that our muscles, as we rip them apart, can be rebuilt so that they come back stronger. So that is part of the consideration. So we think about what do I want, and then we add in what do I need, and then we make sure that we have that on hand. That was an almost straightforward answer.
Mhm. We do have two questions here in the chat. So the first one, sorry, you were done with that, right? Okay. The first one is that you mentioned structure when someone has a history of an eating disorder. Can you explain what you mean by structure?
Yeah. So um, when we talk about the principles, we talk a lot about, eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. And when your ability to tap into that is unreliable, then we need to put in a bit of structure in terms of eating at regular intervals. And like I still have an alarm that goes off every day to say, hey, do you need a snack? Doesn't mean I eat every time that goes off, but it provides the external stimulation to remind me to check in with that. So structure may include um, things that look kind of diety if you're looking at it through a different lens. So we may have times that you are committed to nourishing your body when you can't rely on your hunger and fullness. And sometimes by doing that, those cues start to return. You can rebuild them, but that doesn't always happen. Some people end up on a bit of a in the eating disorder world, I think they call it mechanical eating. I call it methodical meals, but regardless, whatever way we look at it, there's a structure and a commitment to nourish your body. So that might be one example. Um, and the way I frame it is, if somebody breaks their leg, right, we put a cast on it and we give them crutches. And then while it heals, they use those structures. And then in time, we put on a walking boot and we take the crutches away, right? Um, and then hopefully they get well enough that then they don't need either of them. But some people, depending on the degree of the injury, might always need some sort of external device to help support them while they heal. if that makes sense. Does that answer your
That
question?
that was a great way to put it. Um, the next question was in talking about constant feelings of hunger, and Nick said yes, thank you that you answered the question. Um, in talking about constant feelings of hunger, you said to consider if you are eating enough. How would one know if they are eating enough?
Yeah, that's what gets tricky, isn't it? So there's lots of different symptoms that will tell you that you're not getting enough food. Some of them show up in your mood, sometimes they show up in your energy, sometimes they show up in different behaviors. Um, I wish I could just give you a full out straight answer of like, here, follow this calculation, but that sadly does not exist. It's a practice. It's experimenting. All intuitive eating is experiments. So you're like, hey, I'm going to try this for a little bit. And so that might be, I'm going to increase what I'm going to eat for my meals and my snacks for a bit, and I'm going to see how that feels. And does that alter that? It could be all kinds of different things. I don't know if that's giving you what you're looking for, but it's just not a straight up answer because of all of those different voices. Diet and wellness culture has seriously made it difficult for people to know if they're getting enough food. So it's practice. And often we won't know it right in the moment because this hunger fullness department is this dial in us is often really screwed up. And so we may not know if we're full. Sometimes people eat to just not hungry anymore as opposed to eating to comfortably full. And those are different sensations. And so that's really where that learning, there was a different slide. Will it go back? It's going to beep at me. This, right? First, we have to learn how to listen and then understand what those signals are. And that takes time and experiments.
And I just want to mention also, in just in my experience working with clients on the fitness side of this that are trying to figure it out, having somebody to communicate to about these things while you're trying to learn is really helpful for people. So I will have like a lot of back and forth with my clients, especially when it's like someone asked about nourishing your body for weight training, or if you're working out on a regular basis, like how is your body healing and what are you feeling after 10 o'clock in the morning when you've only had one meal? Like just talking to somebody about it, it really helps people figure it out as they experiment, really.
Yeah, it comes back to that learning a language, right? Like you can
Yeah.
learn so much using Duolingo. Um, and but at the end of the day, it's conversing with people who are fluent in the language that really brings out the like, oh, that's how I was
Yeah.
using that. Oh, yeah, that makes more sense that way.
Yes, absolutely. There aren't any more questions in the chat right now, and we are just past 8:30. So does anyone have anything else they want to ask before Kerri ties it up? I'll give them a moment.
Yeah, and if you have questions that you would like to ask but don't want to do it in this kind of format, that's what you can book an appointment and we can talk about what that might look like and how I can help support you, or if there's some resources I can direct you to if working with me is just not accessible. I don't know if anyone on the call is not in Ontario. But it is worth noting that I can be a naturopath to people in Ontario, but I cannot be a naturopath to anyone who's not in Ontario. I can do intuitive eating counseling. I just can't give medical advice to anyone outside of Ontario.
Awesome. You're getting some thank yous in the chat. And I will also email everybody this information on this page as well so that you have it handy.
Awesome.
Cool.
And yeah, we are recording this, so we will get that to you also. I will try and edit out the beginning of Jenna and I trying to sort out Zoom, but no promises. You might have to fast forward a few minutes. And so we might make that note when we share the link that you might need to start at minute 4. Yeah.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you everybody for joining. I hope you learned a lot.